I am lost inside and I am burning to untangle the knots that I got given in birth. And I have fallen down afraid of the briars. She a quiet pilgrim who waits for me to begin. When I open up, she says I love it. We both are in the sea. I love it. We both are getting free together. I am in the dance and I can hear the music of future children celebrating. 'Cause I am opening up, I am opening up, I am opening up to you. And I love it. Open up to me, and I love it. We both are in the sea, and I love it. We both are getting free together. It's deliverance to be intimate, to be honest and accepted. And I love it when we both are in the sea.
Welcome friends to our live event, the culminating celebration of Helen Keller's spiritual birthday. I'm so glad you've made it here and I look forward to being together. We're going to begin with a 30-minute video that I've put together with snippets from the week's activities, wisdom from our speakers, musical offerings, and some reflections on how this vision of the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative began, where we are now, and where we might be headed next. So make yourself comfortable. Bring your whole self here to this occasion. Bring your hearts here to this celebration of Helen Keller, her beautiful life, and to the invitation of love that calls us still.
Swedenborg envisioned people acting in mutual love, functioning together as one unified body. This theology valued free thinking and an active faith that would reimagine human society. And Keller shared these values. The divine presence could be experienced now through a commitment to service motivated by love. She professed, "I believe that life is given us so we may grow in love. And I believe that God is in me as the sun is in the color and fragrance of the flower, the light in my darkness, the voice in my silence."
She wondered if the feeling of the warmth of the sun on her skin, if that's what love was, that she was drawn to the sun, the warmth of the sun on her skin. And eventually, when she did come to understand this word, love, she writes, "The beautiful truth burst upon my mind. I felt that there were invisible lines stretched between my spirit and the spirit of others. So, not unlike the rays of the sun, Keller is experiencing the connection, the warmth, the lines between people with this idea of love.
This new Christianity would demonstrate with unshakable authority how the gospel that Jesus preached was a gospel of love in action, and that true faith is not a mere belief, but rather a life of love and service. This was a loving, inclusive, action-oriented, rational Christianity that appealed to Helen's compassionate heart and brilliant mind.
Feel so honored and excited to share it with the world, to share so much about Helen's life and her spirit that so many people really don't know, to really get to know her more as a human being. It's something I feel the world hasn't seen, and I feel the world is ready to see this.
So William James brings a present for Helen Keller. He brings an ostrich feather. He knows what he's doing when he brings the ostrich feather. First of all, it's a good gift for somebody who's deaf-blind, but also the ostrich feather is a symbol. And it's been a symbol for at least 5,000 years. It goes back to the Egyptians. And different cultures have given it different powers or different significance. But essentially, it boils down to this. The ostrich feather is a symbol for love, for truth, and for justice. Yes, and so that's exactly what Sage has said to us, Reverend Cole. She says, here's your guidepost. Here is your direction, your motto, whatever you want to call it. But you're to be love, and you're to be honest, and you're to be useful. And I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, maybe we'll just get an ostrich feather, and that would be a good symbol for our organization. It goes back all the way to 1891 in that meeting.
So I walked in, and there you were, standing there up in the front with this purple robe on. There you were, a woman, at the end of this service, talking about the Helen Keller Center. And I sat in the back and I thought, a Helen Keller Center? I know about Helen Keller. I can't wait.
As you hear in this conversation between Rosemarie and I, this work of creating something new in Helen Keller's name has been going on for quite some time. It was born during my ministry at the Swedenborg Chapel in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And for quite a while, there was hope that we might create a new physical space in the heart of Cambridge, where Helen went to school and where this chapel resides. Unfortunately, we just were not able to bridge the old and the new. At least not yet. And so right now, like a seed breaking open, making room for a sprout, we have lost our shell, and yet the spirit of this endeavor remains. And if anyone was going to hold us to it, it would be Helen, who often said that the purpose of life is to have fidelity towards a worthy purpose, to continue on despite all obstacles. And so we carry that spirit with us in this work right now. And as I revisit some of those early dreams that we had in Cambridge, I realize that the thread of this ministry has continued and has been strong. It hasn't really changed its essence, even as it changes its form. I want to share now with you a clip of a video that I created back in 2019, just as we were getting ready to go on tour to share the message of the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Center, right before the COVID-19 pandemic. So many of our dreams at that moment really were dashed and challenged by the pandemic and the upset that it caused for so many of us. And yet again, like all things, that upset also included opportunity. Take a look at this video and the way we were framing the vision then, and I hope you'll see its resonance for what we continue to hold and pray for.
Since I was 16 years old, I have been a strong believer in the doctrines given to the world by Emanuel Swedenborg. It was his mission to teach men to listen to the inward voice, rather than to opinions and disputations. After many years of reverent study of the Bible, I gratefully wonder if I am not more indebted to Swedenborg for the faith that turns my darkness to light than I have yet realized. Hi, I'm Sage Cole, and I'm the pastor here at Swedenborg Chapel in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I want to invite you to be a part of a new mission. We are endeavoring to build here the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Center, a space where we can share the spiritual legacy of Helen Keller. Blind and deaf, Helen Keller inspired the world with her ability to reach out, learn, and flourish in a way that most believed impossible in her time. She then went on to dedicate her life to working to break down the barriers that kept others from flourishing in the same way. Helen Keller is a woman for our time. The issues she cared about, like economic justice. In a publication in Home Magazine in 1935, she writes, "The test of a democracy is not the magnificence of buildings or the speed of automobiles, or the efficiency of air transportation, but rather the care given to the welfare of all." Peace. Speaking to wounded soldiers in 1921, Helen said, "Let us all unite then, and insist that America disarm now. Now is the time for the great task of all true Christians to inspire the masses with a definite faith in peace and goodwill." Disability rights. Helen's whole life, of course, was a testament to the importance of supporting people with disabilities, to be fully included in society. She said in a speech in 1925, "The chief handicap of the blind is not blindness, but the attitude of seeing people towards them." Women's rights. Helen wrote often in support of women's suffrage, and in 1913 wrote an article, "Why Men Need Women's Suffrage." In it she writes, "Women have discovered that they cannot rely on men's chivalry to give them justice." Helen's Southern roots also did not stop her from seeing through the ills of racism. She writes in a letter to W.E.B. Du Bois, the head of the NAACP, in 1916, "Let us hurl our strength against the iron gates of prejudice until they fall, and their bars are sundered, and we all advance gladly towards our common heritage of life, liberty, and light, undivided by race or color or creed, united by the same human heart that beats in the bosom of all." And care for the creation. Helen spoke in South Africa in 1951 these words, "Reverence for the beauty and preciousness of earth, and a sense of responsibility to do all we can to make it a habitation of health and plenty for all people." These 6 areas of advocacy that Helen worked for throughout her life, economic justice, peace, disability rights, anti-racism, women's rights, and creation care, remain vital in the world today and at the forefront of our thinking. The Helen Keller Spiritual Life Center will seek to continue to work for the better world that Helen envisioned was possible. Helen also was a woman who understood and lived out the inextricable link between faith and justice. She writes, "Power, not comfort, is my demand upon faith. Living with faith is discomforting to the last degree. It does not offer an escape from life and its evils, but it gives a more abundant life, despite all obstacles and hardships. Faith, rightly understood, is active, not passive. Passive faith is no more a force than is in an eye that does not look or search out. Active faith knows no fear. It denies that God has betrayed his creatures and given the world over to darkness. It denies that men are to be judged after the appearance of race, color, and opinion, instead of according to the law of life. It denies that society in which good will shall replace hate and intelligent cooperation supplant armed force is unattainable. It denies despair. Defeat is simply a signal to press onward. Reinforced by faith, the weakest mortal is mightier than disaster. The God within braces him against the universe. His soul is whole and equal in any emergency." Having never herself become a member of any particular branch of the Swedenborgian Church, we feel it's vital that this center be one that lifts up the Swedenborgian movement as a whole, all people who live by the faith of the new church and who support its work in the world. From Helen Keller's introduction to the Everyman's edition of the True Christian Religion. Swedenborg's message has meant so much to me. It has given color and reality and unity to my thought of the life to come. It has exalted my ideas of love, truth, and usefulness. It has been my strongest incitement to overcome limitations. Were I but capable of interpreting to others one half of the stimulating thoughts and noble sentiments that are buried in Swedenborg's writings, I should help them more than I am ever likely to in any other way. It would be such a joy to me if I might be the instrument of bringing Swedenborg to a world that is spiritually deaf and blind. Let's help to bring Helen's wish to life. Let's help her to be an instrument to bring the teachings of the church to the world, and also to lift up Helen's incredible life. Help us think about the intersections between faith and justice, and to help us live our faith boldly into the world. I grieve the loss of what could have been at Swedenborg Chapel. I also grieve the loss of what I used to believe the world was before 2020. So much has changed over these last 5 years. At the same time, I feel hope in the future and a deeper and fuller resolve in this work to build a new kind of way of being in relationship, of being church in the world. This really is the radical invitation of the new church. It's clearly and boldly stating that the church primarily resides within us, in our experience of being loving and honest and useful in the world. What's it going to take to help people to be transformed in this way? What are the forms of community and activity that can really help us to change? I don't have all the answers to those questions, but I feel quite confident that the possibilities and the ways of bringing about this kind of transformation are myriad. I'm excited by the new forms that have emerged over the last few years. I'm excited by this idea of gathering around love and honesty and usefulness, keeping these three pillars of what we understand God to be central in our community. I'm excited for how these three pillars can bring people of all types together. These are concepts that people of all religions and no religion understand. There are a lot of possibilities now as we step out. Even as we lose some things, we gain others. And luckily, our heroine, Helen Keller, calls us forward despite all obstacles. So we go forth, trying new things, experimenting,
failing, trying new things, welcoming those who resonate with this message, and really seeking to build a kind of a community space that does actually change as new people enter in, that becomes more perfect. Part of the challenges I see and failings of some church communities in the past is that our rituals, our traditions, our ways of thinking and speaking have become so fixed that there isn't a lot of space to welcome in new ideas and perspectives. And so right from the beginning, we are developing a collaborative that is intentionally poised towards the newcomer, towards growth, towards change, acknowledging that all growth and change and newness also requires loss and letting go. We're excited to be a space that is flexible like that, and we're excited to make room for the conversation of how to do that so that all of our communities, all of our collaborators can benefit. We don't quite know where this is headed, friends, but we know that we're headed somewhere. We know we're headed somewhere together, and that this spirit of collaboration has great potentiality. We've already felt it and seen it this week, and I'm so grateful for everyone who shows up in the spirit of love, who's willing to offer up their insights and wisdom freely and honestly, and willing to consider what new uses we are called to. Let's hear some music from some of our collaborators this week as we finish out this introductory time in preparation for our live experience together.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Huangdale, and this is the Freiburg New Church Choir. We're going to sing a little song for you that we learned from Claudia and Dan Zanes, and it's called Let Love Be Your Guide, inspired by John Lewis's words. Something I must tell you now. Let love be your guide. The longing of the human heart knows how. Let love be your guide.
I stood among you and I knew. Let love be your guide. It was clear what you were here to do.
Let love be your guide. Be your guide when you're weary.
Be your guide when you're unsure.
The winds of change are on your side.
Let love be your guide.
History tells us this is true.
Let love be your guide.
Yesterday's lessons still hold true.
Let love be your guide.
The nightmare, it was deep and long.
Let love be your guide.
Now the wind is troubled with the sweetest song.
Let love be your guide.
Be your guide when you're weary.
Be your guide when you're unsure.
The winds of change are on your side.
Let love be your guide.
I may not be with you when the day is done,
Let love be your guide.
but I know you'll be marching till the peace is won.
Let love be your guide.
Be your guide
When you're weary, be your guide when you're unsure.
The winds of change are on your side.
Let love be
Your guide, be your guide when you're weary.
Be your guide when you're unsure.
The winds of change are on your side.
Let love be your guide.
The winds of change are on your side. Let love be your guide. Let love be your guide.
It's hard to find love as I look out into this world, filled with its violence, pain, and oppression, so elite by birth can claim possession. Where is the love? I cry out, love, are you here? Because you seem any place but near. I'm sinking in this quicksand of aches, fueled by hate with power. I call to you, my sister, my brother, another. Lend me your hand before I go under, knowing that this can all too easily be my last breath. Not sure what's worse, to die or carry on diminished worth. In the face of never-ending tyranny, fueled by greed, help my eyes in this moment to see. I hunger for the smallest seed. And I look to you, all of you, here in this movement. You are love. This love we share collective. Love that fights another day, knowing that love remains when the rest is stripped away. So persevere, continue, insist, because we know that love is bigger than all of this that we too often see. And thank you, because you are part of me.
To My Religion by Helen Keller, from the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative. A poem by April Alario. Old book, blessed, sweet, with a stale slant like my grandmother, fragrant as fragile things are. You came to me in wrapping paper Christmas Eve, just after midnight mass. My old college friend who became a doctor thought of me at the antique bookstore. That was the last time we'd meet to commemorate our Vatican visit a decade before, which, to be fair, was a tradition only I really enjoyed. Old book, like memory, you collected dust for another 10 years until one day you were no longer about her. Until my question was for disabled bodies, in disabled bodies. Through disabled bodies I wanted to see, as one sees through a prism, the way the light would split into delicate descriptions of itself, maybe even of God. Your words swirled, cinematic, like incantations in fictional dead languages, unknowable, just felt, and my chest glowed as time and space collapsed in your yellowed must. And there I was, with Helen, marveling at peonies, then astral projecting, or something like it, to places unseen, ethereal feet cupping ancient histories beneath cool cobblestone where mind and book and spirit meet, loosed of time, loosed of body and of sense, yet somehow grounded in all three. Was it dirt beneath my feet, or grass, or carpet, or all of everything, everywhere, all at once, transcendent like the living Jesus, adorned with radiance beside the prophets of old, clothed in existence, standing with truth? And through her, through you, old book, an idea, a Facebook message, and a new friend. Like Helen found Anne in the darkness, like she found water in the silence. One soul, then another, and then a collaborative chain of daisies, soft green stems joining blossom after blossom. Was that it all along, old book? I must ask. Was that why you smelled like flowers all along?
Hello. Hello, friends. It's Sage here, and thank you all so much for being here today for this celebration of our beloved friend and collaborator, Helen Keller. We're going to begin our gathering with 12 minutes of what I call Be Love meditation. And I can see that many of you have shared a bit about where you're coming from. If you haven't, I invite you in the chat to just tell us where you're joining us from so that we can all be here together. Those last words that we heard from one of our collaborators, April, in her beautiful poem, we are a collaborative chain of daisies, this endeavor that we're a part of. And while my face is the one that you can see right now, I know you're all here, and we're all here together, and each one of us is so important. If Helen has anything to teach us, it's that each one of us is so vital and important to this life. So as we gather in, I welcome you all from your various locations, and I invite you to take this time, this introductory time. Maybe you need a couple deep breaths to bring yourself fully here. Hopefully the video and the prelude helped you to be here. Oh, good to see your greetings from California and Pennsylvania and Maryland. We're in all these different parts of the planet, and we are here in spirit in a united way. And so for this first 12 minutes, for this devotion time, I really invite you, perhaps once you've put your location in the chat, to just take a moment to connect with your heart. The theme of our gathering is love. And love is what Swedenborg would tell us, the substance of life. So love is here whether we're aware of it or not. And it can be so powerful to become aware of it, to give our attention to it. And that's my invitation for you this morning, is to give your attention to this presence of love that connects us from all our various places, and even connects us to Helen while she resides on the other side of the veil. You know, part of this effort, as many of you know, it is born from the reality that is church community, that is religion and sacred practice. And part of what I understand the history of religion and church to be on this planet, it's human beings coming together in the spirit of love to give their attention to that which is greater than ourselves. And so we build cathedrals, and we create liturgies, and we write beautiful sacred music. We write sacred texts that then we pass on from generation to generation. We do all of this to draw our attention to the most important part of our human experience. And so my invitation to you is that we can draw our attention there by many, many different means. And one thing that I might invite you to is to consider in your own life and in your own story, what places, what people, what moments have helped you to feel the presence of love, to feel a deep sense of belonging to life, to feel to feel the depth and the weight and the reality of this life. My sense is we all have those experiences, and we stumble into them throughout our lives. It could be as simple as a moment of laughter and joy with a friend, time with little babies always is really helpful to feel that sense of connection. It could be the experience of being kind of lost in creative work, where we sort of lose touch with our self-consciousness or our more limited understanding of who we are, and we just fuse with a greater beingness. We all have these glimpses of love. They may be, maybe there's only one or two, maybe you can recall many. And while we're given these little glimpses, part of the invitation of what I believe Helen really was calling the world to, and what this part of our human experience has been calling the world to, that we call religion and church, is to not just stumble into those experiences of love, but to elicit them intentionally. And so that's what we do during this time. That's what we do as we gather. And from my perspective, being able to feel our oneness with this life, our connection to each other, to the earth, to the higher source of life that has been spinning this tale of creation for so many millennia. My sense is it's really healing and transformative and deeply important to foster this experience as much as we possibly can. It's one thing, at this point in our history, our scientists will tell us we're all connected. I mean, we know that life is energy, and that we are made of the same energy that causes the stars to shine in the sky. We know this intellectually now. Our consciousness has grown to the point where we have that information. And the invitation to be love is to take that information from our heads and bring it into our hearts. And as you seek to do that, and perhaps give that loving attention to yourself, reflecting on this truth that your life and the vital life energy that is in you is in everyone, that you are just as powerful and important to the whole as every other being on this planet. As you give that loving attention to yourself, to this moment, it is almost like a flower that blooms in our hearts. And at the same time, what you might start to notice as you come into this experience of loving connection with others is just, you may notice the stories that tell you that is not true. Because this is sort of the crossroads we're living in right now, is we have this vital truth that our ancestors have carried to us generation to generation, telling us that life is sacred, that life is rich and whole, that we are one, that we are connected, that we are here for the purpose of love. We have our scientists telling us we're all connected. And yet we also have written many, many stories of disconnection, and we have lived those stories. And so they are in here too. They are in our experience. They are held as thoughts, and they are sometimes also held as emotions and pain in the body. So when I invite us to be love, friends, I do not by any means suggest that we can just snap our fingers or click our heels and all of a sudden just feel the radiance of our connection. When I invite us to be love, I actually am naming and inviting us onto a beautiful and sometimes perilous journey to remember that truth deep within. Because part of remembering this truth is to shine light
on all of the ways that we have told ourselves and told each other in words, so often in actions of cruelty and hate, that this deeper truth is not real. This invitation to love is one that requires courage. It requires commitment, a commitment to the truth and to uncovering that which is false. And at this moment, while we celebrate Helen Keller and her incredible life, the incredible vision that she had for what this world could be, what life could be. And we also reflect on where we are right now as a species, as a community of humans on this planet. There is a lot to face. I wonder sometimes if she were to come down right now and kind of see the circumstances, how she would hold it all. And I believe that's a question for us all in this work. My sense is that she would continue to tell us that the work remains, recognizing again that the weakest ones among us have the power to bring transformation. This is so essential to so many of our sacred stories. And so as we gather this morning, our small gathering of humans, this, those of you who have made it into this circle, I hope you each can feel that each one of you is vital, important, loved. There's a lot of ways to use our love in the world, and there's so many things happening just today. I mean, this is International Women's Day, and yet you bring your attention here. And I'm so grateful for that. And I pray that you will feel that reality, that you'll feel this connection that we're sharing, and that together something new will be born even in this gathering today. So that is my Be Love meditation as we gather in. And now we're going to move into our second portion of our gathering, which in our frame we call Be Honest. And I'll be inviting our panelists to come back into the frame. So Alex perhaps can help that to occur. In the spirit of honesty, our host, Jackie Shahada, is not able to be here today. We should all hold her in prayer. She had a medical emergency last night, so we're figuring it all out. And here is everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome back to the circle, Rosemarie. And for attendees, so the chat is open. If you want to offer any reflections there, we'll be saving that. The Q&A is also open if you have questions. I'm still figuring out how to man that, but if you have questions, you can offer those for our circle, and we'll do our best to get to things. And if we don't, we will follow up afterwards. All right, I think we have everyone. Great. Friends, hello.
Hello.
Hello. We made it here. So wonderful. So we talked a bit yesterday about how we would go about our sharing today. I'm going to invite us to kind of go in order from the week and just share a bit about who you are, how you've come to this moment to be with us, how Helen has been calling you in your life. We'll kind of go around and share how we're each being called here, and then we'll open up for some more conversation. And Brad reminded me, I should have done this before my Be Love meditation. For people who are participating who have visual impairments, it'd be very useful for us to introduce ourselves and share who we are and what we look like. So for those who are joining, I'm Sage. I'm a white woman with a little mad mop of dirty blonde hair on the top, in my 40s. And I'm coming to you from, I have a picture of Helen behind me. Brad, why don't you jump in and let us know where you're coming from?
Okay, thank you, Sage. I'm Brad McKinnon, and I am joining you this morning from a coffee shop in Huntsville, Alabama, which is about 60 miles east of Helen Keller's birthplace and childhood home in Tuscumbia. I am a middle-aged white man with brown hair growing increasingly gray, and I'm wearing a blue sweater. And I live in Florence, Alabama, which is just across the Tennessee River, the north side of the Tennessee River from Tuscumbia, where I teach history at a small seminary and undergraduate college. And as I think about Helen Keller, and I've studied her basically full time for the last 5 years, one of the things that stands out to me is the tension that existed between her Swedenborgian faith, with its emphasis on esotericism and the otherworldliness of it, and her political commitments that were much more based on materialism. And some people, there's certainly tension there. Some people see contradiction. But as I think about her otherworldly theology, and combine that with her commitment to materialism in the political sense, I think that the way she understood Swedenborgian, her Swedenborgian faith, that what happens in the next life is based on what happens in this life, that what happens here matters. I think that helps us understand how she was able to sort of combine those two ways of thinking. And I think that's very important to recognize. And because of that, Helen Keller was recognized the importance of connection, the importance of community, and she lived a very incarnational life. And I think it's, and I want to thank you, Sage, for your leadership. And I think it's really important that you have titled this, what we're doing here, as the Helen Keller Spiritual Life Collaborative, because the idea of collaborating, that's, if you read Keller's letters, her speeches, her public works, she was about collaborating with anyone and everyone to recognize problems that existed in the world, and how she could work with people to make those things better. As you mentioned, it was never going to be a finished product in this life, but that she was working toward a very important goal that she could experience in the next life. And as I think about that, I think about your conversation with Rosemarie, and how that was just a perfect way to sort of end the early portion of what we were doing this week, because I see those same kind of commitments in you and Rosemarie, this emphasis on connection, this emphasis on community, this emphasis on sacred spaces, that we all live incarnationally, obviously, because we are human. And physical space is important. It was important to Keller. Connection is important. It was important to Keller. And if we recognize problems that exist in our communities and in the world, and challenges that we all face, I think it's important to recognize that Keller recognized those as well, and thought it was important to do something. And she thought it was important to do something not just by herself, but working with others. And we might not have all the answers, and sometimes we might not know exactly what to do, but if we could do something, I think it honors Keller's legacy.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much, Brad. Yes, we all have our little part to play, but all the little parts connect. Beautiful. Rebecca, would you share how you are and how you've come to this work, and give us a little intro on who you are and where you're coming in from?
Well, I come at all of this, like you, Sage, from the perspective of the Swedenborgian Church. I am the dean of the seminary of that denomination here in Berkeley, California. And that's really how I come to Helen Keller, through that lens. And now it's become a focus of my academic research. And but there have been so many gains. I loved the conversation yesterday, Rosemarie, about what we gain through encounter with disability, encounter with body difference, encounter with all of the changes of our own bodies and our own beings. And I've gained so much from this work. And it has introduced me to the world of disability studies and disability theology. And I tell you, there's no body of people on this planet who are thinking so clearly about what it means to be embodied as those who are doing it from a disability perspective. I just feel so grateful to have been able to encounter this community of people and to be learning so much from that encounter. So I'm here in Berkeley, California. We have a library archive with some really interesting objects. And I was also interested in the conversation about what do we have tangible that might go on tour, or that might be a way for us to have encounters with embodied ways of being in the world. And I just brought a couple of things up from the basement. My back is hurting a little today from bringing this bust of Swedenborg up from the basement and managing to get it on top of my desk. So this is the bust that Urbana University sent to Helen Keller, shipped. They packaged it up and shipped it. I can't imagine how much it cost. They shipped it to her in Massachusetts just so that she could do this, so that she could feel his face, his nose, his eyes. So I've spent some time today actually doing this and thinking about what I can learn from this experience. They shipped it to her and they shipped it back just so she could do that. Helen Keller did express an opinion about such statues and busts and cast figures of people's bodies. And she wasn't super keen on it, actually. She loved the flesh and blood, the veins, the movement, the softness of people's skin. And this was very much how she connected, was through touching people's faces and touching people's hands in particular. She wasn't crazy about the cold, fixed statue forms of people, but I'm sure she appreciated being able to feel the contours of Swedenborg's face. But she loved touch, and she experienced love and connection through physical touch. And I think this is part of why she became so intimately close friends with so many people, as has come out in the week's events, talking about W.E.B. Du Bois and William James and Mark Twain and all of these people who she had this intimate connection with. It was because she would greet them, she would meet them and touch their face and have this connection to people through touch. Also through her beautiful letters, her correspondence as well. Another artifact that we have here are some of her letters. We have original letters from Helen to various members of the Swedenborgian Church in particular. And my favorite piece here is a letter she wrote. She wrote many letters to Paul Sperry, who was her coordinator on the project of writing the book, My Religion. And this one in particular is much longer than most of her letters. It's 3 long pages typed on her typewriter. And in it, she gives a religious biography. She talks about her life as a child growing up and how she encountered religion. She talks about Reverend Brooks, which we heard a lot about from Brad's session. Thank you, Brad. I learned so much about Bishop Brooks in that session. And she has this one interesting paragraph here in which it makes a big ask of Reverend Sperry, a big appeal. And she says, I think you must sense the loneliness of my situation. And here's the loneliness. It's not that she doesn't have friends. She has lots of friends, but it's a particular kind of loneliness. Few people are interested in ideas, and still fewer those I meet care anything about religious experience. As Mrs. Macy told you, I am greatly in need of a companion who would be congenial. Naturally, I should prefer a new church woman. So she's asking for a particular kind of friendship that's missing in her wonderful, wonderful group of friends. She has lots of religious figures who she's writing to and meeting, but she wants a close friend with whom she can talk about religious experience. That's missing for her. That's the piece that's missing. And so she's asking for, is there a woman who could come and visit with me in my home, even live with me in my home, as many of her staff did live with her, and with whom I can talk about spiritual things and spiritual experience in particular, not just ideas, but religious experience. We know that Paul Sperry did try. We have a letter that he wrote the very next day to a woman living in New York, asking if she might be interested in the role. As far as we know, that never panned out. But the last artifact I'll show you is a Braille edition of her book, My Religion, which you won't be able to feel or see much through the screen, but you can see the Braille there. This is a Braille edition of her book, My Religion, on her religious experiences. So that's just a little bit. I wish you could reach through the screen and feel these things with me, but I'm enjoying that invitation to think about embodiment and love through physical contact and through our senses.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca. When you first told me about that request for a new church woman, I thought, oh, I was born 100 years too late. I would have definitely taken up that invitation. And I do feel like part of what we're trying to create here is a space where we can talk about our religious experiences together honestly and lovingly. So perhaps it's not too late. Thank you so much. Ray, would you like to let us know what's brought you here, how the Spirit has brought you here to this occasion?
I like the way you asked that. Can you hear me clearly out there?
Yes.
So I'm Ray Silverman. I'm sitting in my office at Bernathen College, where I've been teaching religion and English for the past 25 years. Many years ago, when I fell in love, I had this strong feeling, like a calling from the other side, that this would be forever. And I hadn't seen any book about that. Even the Bible seemed to say that you're not married in heaven. I thought that couldn't be, that if God brought you together, and it felt like God had brought us together, he would keep us together forever. So I wanted to write a book about the eternity of marriage. At the time, I thought I'd call it Staying in Love. So like a good scholar and a student, I went to a library in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and did my research. My wife and I took out a stack of about 12 books, brought them all home and said, that's not it, this is not it, this is not it. And suddenly there was this beautiful red book with gold lettering on it called Conjugal Love. This was by Emanuel Swedenborg. And he wrote about marriage in heaven, people who had been happily married for thousands of years. And my wife and I both said, we found it. We don't have to write the book. However, the book was really hard to read. I had a PhD in English, and I was having trouble reading this book. And so I thought I would rewrite this book for Joe Jackhammer in the street. I named him Joe Jackhammer long before Joe the Plumber, but it was Joe Jackhammer. And I began writing, and I thought, well, you know, I need to find out if my understanding of this is accurate. I found myself at the Swedenborg School of Religion in Newton, Massachusetts, way back in 1979. And back there, I met a man called Friedemann Horn, who was the 1 year from Switzerland director. And he said to me, whoa, you may want to become a minister. Well, I had never considered myself a minister. You know, I was born in a Jewish family, raised in a Catholic neighborhood. And to me, ministers had collars, tight collars, and I never wanted to wear those. And you couldn't marry, so I didn't want to be a minister. But he said, no, you could writing could be a form of your ministry. Plus, Friedemann Horn had been a guard in a Nazi concentration camp in Germany. And one of the men he was watching over was a man named Silverman. And one day, Silverman stumbled, and Friedemann went to help him. And Silverman said in German, "Du sollst nicht das do. You shouldn't do that." And in that moment, Friedemann saw the humanity in this prisoner Silverman, and he realized that he knew that if Friedemann were helping a Jewish prisoner, he'd get in trouble. And the Jewish prisoner didn't want him to get in trouble. That kind of changed his life. And he was studying at the University of Marburg after that and met a Swedenborgian faculty member there who introduced him to Swedenborg. And that was like the turning point for Friedemann. So there he was at the Swedenborg School of Religion. There I was, some kid named Silverman who just wanted to take a course, and he was inviting me into the ministry. All that was just so, whoa, beyond anything I could imagine. Like God must have put that together in some way. So here I am now, been in the ministry since, well, I was ordained in 1984, so it's many, many years. And I was been a pastor in a few different societies, but wound up teaching at Bernathen College. Along the way, of course, I came across Helen Keller, and Helen Keller could explain Swedenborg in a way that Swedenborg couldn't explain. I just loved the way she said things. And if you heard April Ilario's beautiful poem, April, if you're out there, it was breathtaking the way you read Helen, especially the words, "Truly, I have looked into the heart of darkness and refused to yield to its paralyzing influence. But in spirit, I am one who walks the morning." It was so beautifully read. And then you added, for you, it was a moment of exercising our will, the will to choose life and reject nothingness. And for me, that emphasis on effort, spiritual effort, even though it's coming from God, we have to do our part, made me cry every time I read Helen Keller. I would weep. I don't weep very often, but she made me weep. And I knew we need that effort, that will to keep our marriages strong and alive, to keep focusing on our mission, no matter what obstacles come our way. And so, I've been a huge, huge Helen Keller fan all my life. That's my story.
Beautiful, Ray. Thank you so much. I love hearing the movement of providence in your story and that emphasis on choosing. Got to choose.
Mm.
Hillary, would you like to share where you're coming from and your pull of love from Helen?
Of course, I'm happy to. I'm Hillary, and I am a white woman with dirty blonde hair, wearing a black blazer and a black shirt, sitting in my office. I think that's about it. My hair is about a little below shoulder length. In my 40s, blue eyes. I am gonna speak from the heart and hope I don't ramble too much. I am a deaf woman. I'm also disabled. And when I was a little girl, I remember seeing the play, The Miracle Worker. And I also remember watching the film. And it was the first time that that I had seen someone on stage or on screen that I felt I could see a bit of my own experience, and as a young girl, feeling very different and outside, but also feeling as I got older. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit. So then, when I was in my 20s, I revisited the film The Miracle Worker, and I was like, wow, I am so moved by the story. It always felt like a part of me, but and in the end, I thought, I've got to learn more about the rest of her life. I don't really know what happened after that. She was 7 when the film ended. And so I started reading and reading and reading about her, and I was like, this is incredible, and I felt this really deep. As I know, I'm not the only one. I think most people here feel a really deep spiritual connection with her. I just felt like the way she talked about the world and being human and being embodied and her spirituality just resonated with me. And very like you, I would just cry and feel like, wow, how is this? What is this connection that I feel and this calling that I feel to tell her story? And I'm an actor and a writer. And so I was like, well, I have to tell the story. So this is almost 20 years ago I started. So I spent a year researching. And throughout the last 20 years, my research hasn't stopped. It's been a continuous journey. But I started writing a script to be a film. And I've been working on it for all of those years and fits and starts, and have gathered some really amazing, beautiful people to come on board, talk about collaboration, because I can't do this alone. And also to forge a path as a deaf woman, director, actor, writer is new and has been interesting to embody and show and draw on Helen's courage, that I can communicate with people and let them know that I can do this. And so that's where I'm at. So this project has been the heart of my career, and it's something that I'm hopefully very, very close to bringing to the screen. And hopefully shooting this summer. If you understand, prayers that it all comes together. It's been really incredible, and lots of I've felt God with me so many times in bringing the right people together, and meeting you, Sage, and meeting you, Doug, and the woman who's written music for the film already. That was miraculous, and all of the actors and creative people who've come on board so far, they all have such wonderful big open hearts, and I know I can keep trusting the right people who come on board really are have these big open hearts, and they believe in Helen's story and in her spirit, and so that's why I'm here. I'm honored, I'm humbled, I'm scared, I'm excited to bring her story in. And Rebecca, also so much of the film, the love story is quite central. It's not everything that John hits is a big part of it, Mark Twain. And also my journey of as a writer and as a filmmaker and an actor, thinking about the heart of what Helen had to say, and how can I convey that? How can I communicate that with film? And it's been a beautiful journey and challenge to do that, and to think about using this medium that is all visual and sound to communicate her experience of so much touch and smell and taste and especially the spirit. So that's what brought me here, and I'm also excited for showing the stage in a way. For me as an actor, art has been my church. The theater and even the movie theater as well. So that aspect of community that can happen when a group of people can fall into a story, relax into a story, be invited into that kingdom, of this story that we're sharing, and see what it opens for themselves, and see what maybe changes in their hearts, and see how that might let them connect even more intimately or deeper with the people that have come to see the film with them, or who saw it a week ago, or their friends or family that they want to share that with. So that's my little contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Such a beautiful contribution. We are all praying for all the love that's going to come together and collaboration that will come together for this effort. And
Yes, this collaborative is about churches, all kinds of things. So, especially in this modern world, I think the movie theater is high on the list of how people access story and meaning. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Doug, my friend.
Yes. So I had some things to say today that I was prepared to say, but all of a sudden I had like a circle with bubbles that went on, as I heard people speak. And I want to talk about Hillary since she just spoke. I encourage everyone to see You and Me and Close to You, that are two films that she did. Close to You was done with Elliot Page, and they're two very powerful movies about that have disability as part of their theme, but love and connection. Very, very powerful. So you can see the actress here. You can see how delightful she is, but you can also see how really amazingly talented she is. So also want to comment on what Rebecca said, because I had this thought that when I was writing about Helen Keller, I found out that somebody had done a bust of her hand, and also Anne Sullivan. And I thought, I want to find those busts. I want to hold those hands. But I can't find the hands. I know it was done by a woman. If anybody out there knows what happened to those, it seems
Well,
to
there's
me
a
that they're
bust.
real
There is
treasure.
a bust in Boston of the two of them with their faces and their hands entwined that they're trying to get installed into the city hall, the state capitol building. Yeah. I don't know
Okay,
if that's the same one, but
yeah, thank you. Thank you. I've been looking forever for that. I'm going to be 80 in April, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with that. I'm struggling. I just wrote a book of poems that came out last week about aging, and aging is a kind of disability too, and so I'm dealing with that. So obviously, I have white hair and a white beard. I think my children say I dress the same way every day with my blue jeans and these work shirts that I live in. So I came to Sage because of my children, Noah, Tyler, and Anna, and they live in different states, but we would meet every other Sunday, and they said to me, Dad, you keep writing these books, but you don't share them with anybody. Nobody knows you wrote any books about Helen Keller. They're just out there, sitting in Amazon. So I got a hold of the Swedenborgian Foundation, and they directed me to Sage, which is just this miracle thing that happened for me. I feel the feeling I have, the emotion I have is like overwhelming gratefulness. And it's a gratefulness for everything I'm learning from everybody. I thought I knew a lot about Helen Keller. It turns out that I don't know a lot about Helen Keller. There's just so many gaps there. And I never had anywhere to share. So this opportunity, I mean, all the stuff that I wrote, I never had a platform. So this was amazing for me. So Rosemarie was talking about two things, and Brad mentioned it too, and that's this idea of sacred spaces and pilgrimages, and that really rings all my bells. I don't travel anymore unless it's with a purpose, and I look for those sacred spaces, whether it's a sacred tree or. When I realized that Brad was down there at Ivy Green, I thought, oh my God, that's a sacred space, and I have to go down and be part of that. I was thinking a joke went into my head about maybe Rosemarie could start a Helen Keller travel agency and we could go on pilgrimages together. So, you know, but I'm in Saginaw, Michigan. And so if you're from Michigan, you do this, you hold up your hand. And we carry a map with us wherever we go. And this is Saginaw Bay here, Lake Huron's here, Saginaw Bay. And I live just down about 20 miles from the bay. And this is my writing space. And this is a sacred space for me here. I come in this room and I write every morning. The photos are mine in the background. My music is back there. So this is where I come for creativity. I get a lot of good energy here. It's when you're a writer, you hear people say to you, well, you've got to create a space that's a writer's space. So I have done that. And so I won't ramble on too long here, but I wanted to say that I had this motto, and my motto, it came to me about 20 years ago, and the motto was do as much good as you can in the time you have left. And then I thought, well, okay, that was great, and I still love it, but what's good, right? I mean, what I think is good runs into problems right away when you talk to other people. So when you look at things like love and honesty and usefulness, you run up against individuals who don't share any of that with you. So I gave a presentation on why it is. Uh, Preaching to the choir, I knew, and everybody here knew just about everything I was saying, but it was kind of a summary of why we need to bring her back. But now I think we face a bigger challenge, and that's how do you bring her back? And somehow we have all these different people. Deepak Chopra wrote a book, and in it he had like 7 definitions of God, depending on who you were talking to. And so, and each of those levels has a different meaning making, and they talk about justice and truth and love and God all differently. And so if we're a collaborative and we're trying to make a difference, we have to think about who the audience is. We know it's all of humanity, but when we're trying to convince different groups that they should pay attention to sacred spaces and to pilgrimages, then we need to do some careful thinking. Anything else here? I'm a teacher, a writer. That's, I worked with blind kids for 30 years. So
Thank you,
Sage.
Doug. Thank you, Doug. You've been such a wonderful piece of this collaborative puzzle as we've been going along. And another very important piece of this puzzle has been you, Rosemarie, and our journey together these last 5 years. Let us know a bit about you and what brings you here to this collaborative endeavor.
Well, my name is Rosemarie Garland-Thomson, and I'm delighted and honored to be here in this gathering. And I want to thank you, Sage, for gathering us, bringing us together in this community to make something. You made something here. We all have made something. Together, that Helen Keller has been the source of, or maybe even we should just say the occasion for. And I want us to be able to mark that as we're doing. So thank you for that, and thank you to my colleagues. So I'm coming to you, joining you from San Francisco, which is where I live, and I'm in my messy book and paper strewn office. I am a senior-ish woman with pale skin and silver hair, and I have a whole series of cool glasses, one pair of which I have on my face right now, and I like lipstick, so I have some very nice reddish, pinkish lipstick, and there is a lovely Japanese screen from 1948 that belonged to my in-laws behind me. People often comment on that when they see it. Probably the most distinctive thing about me, other than the description that I just gave, is that I have very unusual arms and hands, and those are not visually accessible to my interlocutors and people here because of the way that this communication technology operates. And I'm not going to show them to you because it makes me a little uncomfortable, but that's part of the way that I would want to describe myself. And of course, it has to do a great deal with how we have ended up here together. So I, as I said, have these unusual arms and hands that have been with me. This is the way I am since birth. I grew up in the western part of the United States, in California and in Nevada, and
I thought I didn't ever know anybody else with a disability. I never thought of myself as having a disability because at the time that I was growing up, the word disability or the idea that disability or people with disabilities were an identity group, the idea of disability pride, any of those things were simply not available to me, as is often the case. But I'm a teacher now, and have been an English teacher for a long, long time, because when I was growing up, because of my arms and hands and being a girl, I didn't do things with balls or swords or horses or much of anything, but I could talk a lot and I could read. And so I found myself relating to the world and being interested in story. And so when I went to school, I studied stories. I ended up being an English teacher because you have to get a job in life, and that was something I could do. So I've always been an English teacher, which means that I always deal with narratives, or the better way of saying that is with story. And it's the particular story of Helen Keller and the way that story is manifest in the world in different forms that I think is the most generative opportunity that we have as a, maybe we'll just call it the Helen Keller Collective, right? That Sage has called us to. And in meeting you all and in doing the other work that I do around Helen Keller and around disability studies and disability culture, I've become very attentive to the ways that people engage with the world, the varying ways that people engage. So I engage with the world in a particular way through the body I have. And Helen Keller engaged with the world through the body she had, as we all do. And I think it's very, as I said, generative to think about this relationship between body and world, is one way I talk about it, and to think about what that makes. And the story of Helen Keller and what Helen Keller made, the way she related to the world, the way she made meaning in the world, the stories that she told, we can bring that forward in the particular way that we are thinking about. So we were talking about objects yesterday, and we've talked about objects a lot, but I want us to think together, and Sage, let's just all call us together on this, of what kinds of objects there are in the world that are touchable and that Helen Keller touched, and that we can maybe start with that and go from there. So Rebecca was talking about showing us this bust that's that she has, this that apparently Helen Keller touched. I think this is a great place to start. And that made me think of something. Let me see if I can hold on to this thing that I got on my iPad. So here we go. I don't know how well you can see this. And you may know this. So Joe Davidson, the American sculptor from the late 19th and early 20th century, made a bust of Helen Keller. And this is a photograph of, it's a wonderful triad here of Helen Keller on the right-hand side. Let me describe this. So this is Helen Keller on one side, touching the bust, the sculpture of herself, which is very realistic. So it's Helen Keller touching a representation of herself, experiencing it haptically, if you will. And between the two figures of the fleshly Helen and the I guess the sculptural Helen, let's say, is the actual Joe Davidson, the sculpture. I'm sorry, I just dropped this. And that would be a great thing to talk about. I saw that sculpture this summer when I was in Washington, D.C. It was part of a, I don't know, something I saw, maybe at the National Portrait Gallery. And also, Joe Davidson did a sculpture, a wonderful sculpture of that I've shown over and over and over again in the work that I've done as an English teacher and a disability studies culture worker, whatever you want to, pretentious thing you want to call me. But a wonderful sculpture of Gertrude Stein. And so I think we could do things like this together to we talked about the idea of writing grants, raising money, getting some curators involved to get a small exhibition of things that Helen Keller would have touched, and to use that to open up something larger. I talked to you because I visited many times the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., because I used to live in that area. I taught at Howard University for a long time. And as many of us may know, Helen Keller is entombed or buried in the Washington National Cathedral across the way from Matthew Shepard, who is a young gay man who was murdered a number of years ago. And to think about touching things as a form of pilgrimage, and to think about the things that human beings design and make in the world that fit and don't fit different kinds of bodies, I think would be a really productive enterprise to come out of what we're able to do here together. So I want to call, Sage has called us together, and I want to call us together to think about how we can find somebody who will help us do this at some, I don't know, museum or some place, to cook something up together that we can do that starts with the things that Helen Keller touched.
I love this embodied vision that you have, Rosemarie, and it pulls a lot of pieces together, because we are homeless at the moment. We don't have a physical space, so there's no reason we can't go on tour. So already, you know, so many of the people who have come into the collaborative are in all parts of the country, all parts of the world, and Helen traveled the world. You know, she also didn't find a home within one particular church or space. She would collaborate with anybody and different organizations, you know, that she helped to found and then she worked for, you know, and I think that's so much of what we long to create is bringing lots of different groups together. So this kind of a pilgrimage tour could travel to churches, to universities, to, you know, any space. And that's one of the fruitful workings between you and I, Rosemarie, is the church world and the academic world. We come from so many different worlds. And I know one of the hopes is to really bring up that message that no matter what world we come from, our voices are important and we have something to bring. So very exciting. In this theme of collaboration, which is where we want to end our gathering tonight. This is just the beginning. You know, we're not going to solve all the problems today by any means, but this has been so fruitful to have you all in one space, all of those who are attending. And I wonder if, I know some of you one of you has to go to a soccer game and you have other things you have to move along to. But if anyone has been inspired by any of this sharing and wants to share anything about possible future collaborations, even, you know, Hillary's she's working on something important. We want all her energy on this movie that she's making. So there may be things you're doing in your own work and life that can intersect with what we're doing, or ideas about how
do this, to make this thing together. I wonder if anyone wants to jump in with a thought about where Helen might be calling us next.
I have a statement, I guess. I was helping the Theodore Retke Museum House try to show the world who Theodore Retke was. And we were brainstorming in different ways, but I because of my background, I'm looking at the future all the time. So I know that things like you can reproduce people digitally, and you can have them read material in their own voice, things that they had written. Every time I throw this out, it seems futuristic, but we're heading in a direction where you can create a digital Helen Keller. The other thing is 3D printing now. If you wanted to print these different kinds of artifacts and have them in miniature, for example, you could. I know you can do that. I've seen 3D printing where they've done some. That technology has taken off. So
we have. Oh, go ahead, Hillary.
This is just for way in the future, but an idea that I have for when the film is complete is that I want to write a play or a stage that would be easy for people to produce, that won't be super expensive, and that any actress who is deaf or blind or deaf-blind can play the role of Helen. And so I have a dream of, a play that wouldn't be exactly the same as the film. There's so many things I couldn't put in the film, so maybe it's like all the parts of the story that didn't make it that are still so fascinating, and share that with my art community and of deaf and disabled actors, and that could be way in the future, certainly a way that we could all gather together. And also, Baack, I wanted to say, I mean, we can talk separately, but if there's objects that could be in the film, that could be really exciting. And of course, when I make the film, we can all get together for that and have a party.
Yes.
I don't know it would be beautiful to maybe do a screening in a place that's a sacred space for Helen, near a place. That would be really powerful with some of those objects there at the screening.
Beautiful.
This is Rosemarie. I just had an idea about 3D printers. I have, of course, I don't know, seen or worked with over my life models of things that are done with 3D printers that are tactile models. That is to say, they have the scale of the human hand or the scale of the human body. And they are for anybody, but they are for the experience of tactily or haptically knowing something. So they're a mode of expression, or a mode of communication, if you will. It would be really interesting for us to think about getting this bust of Helen Keller done by the sculptor Joe Davidson, to get somebody who's got a bunch of these 3D printers to print models of Helen Keller's head that are small enough that they would fit easily the scale of the human hand, to think about that. But they would also, we'd have to think about what people were imagined doing with them. That idea of thinking of what's haptically available and how that works and what scale is most approachable, because we have that, the large size of it, which is to scale of the human body, but then to try to imagine a smaller size, like that could be a Helen Keller bust of Joe Davidson, by Joe Davidson, that's somebody's keychain, or all sorts of things that a 3D printer could do to make tactile models of things. And that would be a really interesting way to include something like that And to, I don't know, to get it going, maybe you could get the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco to do something like that. They're kick-ass over there. They have a sign that says, we're the blind leading the blind and proud of it.
Proud of it.
And I have a lot of close colleagues that work there. Josh Mila, who now works for Amazon, who just won a MacArthur a couple of years ago, just wrote a book, and he just is giving book talks. So that might be something that we could think about doing in terms of finding a place for our exhibit.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments from different people who are connected to different universities and
Right.
have connections to disability offices. You know, I think thank you for all of those comments. And I think all of you could be team members in this effort, because right now it's that's what we're looking for. That's what we need. I love these ideas. And for me, there's such a wonderful synergy between, Brad started us off talking about Helen's, mystical mind, her vision of the afterlife, and yet her deep commitment to bringing that into the world and into a real physical experience. And I think there's something very powerful about thinking about objects, physical experience, places, where we then bring people together in bodies to be having these conversations and to be experiencing things together. It feels like a tent revival slash pilgrimage slash academic tour. It can kind of be all of those things mixed into one in a very beautiful beautiful way. Any other thoughts from our
I have kind of a different slant on this. And I totally applaud this effort to get the physical objects together. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that these physical objects have to point to something higher. I went through all the talks last night, and I noticed there was a consistent theme. Doug put it this way, we all begin at this level of narcissism where we think we're the center of the universe. Then we move up to a higher level where we see everyone thinks they're the center of the universe. And then we move up to an even higher level where we realize there's something more, something beyond. And I listened to all the different talks last night, and everyone touched on this idea that Helen felt that there was something more, because she wasn't constrained by the world and time and sense. She didn't have the distractions of the auditory and visual distractions. She almost lived in this permanent meditation, you might say. And I think that whatever we do has to keep in mind we're pointing people to something higher. I love this idea of, tangible objects, but it could become idolatry very easily. And that would be the last thing Helen would want. She wanted us all to point to that something higher. So if this leads to something higher, I'm all in.
I love that reminder, Ray. It's really important. It's deeply important to me. And I think there's a part of what we're trying to do. I mean, Helen's story, as Hilary is trying to help bring her humanity back into her story. Like, we definitely are not worshiping her as a saintly figure. We want to bring out the fullness of her humanity and the fullness of our own. I think that's been some of the destructive way in which her memory has been carried, is that, well, she was really special, and so she was able to do all of those good things but other people with disabilities can't be as great as Helen Keller, or we really want to. For me, the essence of the message is bringing us all into our humanity and into our divinity, and lifting that up in a bold way, but wonderful reminder. Yeah. Rebecca, go ahead.
But also this really important element of how do we make changes on the societal level so that every human being can participate to their fullest, so that everyone can have a useful place. And so that also, I think, how can this legacy, how can our work have that as a goal too? What are the changes that we need to be making around us so that everyone can participate, and not just giving money, not just, kind of an abstract, as you're saying, idolizing of somebody, but towards a useful end, towards a better society where everyone can participate fully. Everyone has the kinds of accommodations they need in order to be full participants in their communities. Yeah.
Yes. That's
This is Rosemarie again. Can I say one more thing? I'm always the queen of one more thing. I have to go to a baseball game for an 8-year-old in just a minute. But one of the things I didn't say is that I have been working for the last while, not just as an English teacher, but as a bioethicist. And in that work in bioethics, I have been able to, I don't know, participate in conversations about larger questions about reproductive ethics. And I have made a case that we should, as a society and as in practicing medicine and science and in developing medical and scientific technologies, that we should respect and conserve the human variations that we think of as disabilities. And there is a tremendously strong normalizing, I want to be very careful about this, a tremendously strong normalizing regime, if you will, and that's not the right word that I want to use, in medical science to eliminate disability and to eliminate people with disabilities along the way. This is very controversial, but you know, Brad knows a lot about this because one of his close mentors is also a colleague of mine, and that's Brian Baack. I think we can think about the ethical issues that are involved in the development of testing and the development of selective testing and selective termination in terms of, you know, finding disability and eliminating it from the world. These are very controversial and very difficult conversations to have, but they're very important conversations to have just now. And so I think that for the kinds of conversations that I'm talking about in terms of bioethics or disability bioethics, that we can think about that as a conversation that we want to enter into in some way with the kinds of things that we might make around Helen Keller.
Yes, that's been in our conversation for a while now, and one of our board members works in bioethics, and I think, yes, and every time we represent disability, we're helping that conversation, and we need to really have those conversations, and I feel like this can be another mission of the work. So beautiful.
And I'm going to have to say goodbye. Like I said, I have to go to a baseball game for an 8-year-old.
Well, this will not be our last conversation. I know many of you probably have to pop off because we have just about 15 more minutes. So if you have to go, thank you so much, Rosemarie.
Oh, thank you all. It's wonderful to be here with you, and
we look forward to
honored
planning
to be
our
in this community.
Yeah, and we look forward to planning our first gathering in person soon.
I know, and what we're going to do with that 3D printer.
Yeah, we'll do something.
All right.
Thanks. I have to leave as well. But
All right.
Thanks, Sage. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all so
Thanks,
much.
Brad.
Thank you all so much. Well, you know, we have about 15 minutes left, and I just, you know, I think these questions around collaboration, I've been so appreciating the messages that have come in through the chat with ideas. You know, this is how this will happen, is if we want it to happen. And I think one of the questions I'm really holding for people right now is, what's you know, life is very overfilled for a lot of us. That's the reality. A lot of us are very burdened with a lot of things. And I think at the same time, maybe we all do have like a little bit of space
a little bit of space to use our energy in a new way, and that we would, and I think one of the goals of the collaborative is that we're very intentional about what do we have to bring and what do we need. And we're not overgiving and we're not undergiving. Really, I hope that as people get involved in this work, it will bring more health and wholeness to our individual lives and to our collaborative lives. So this is the question for all our attendees and all of you. What kind of space do you have in your life? Where do you feel like you have gifts to bring? And if you're our community in a particular place, do you want to invite us to your town, to your community, to bring something and to collaborate on something? That's kind of the live question at this moment is, what shall we do? And a deep part of me feels like, even though we're a small gathering, we're the ones, we're the ones. And Helen reminds us to not think small of ourselves, but to realize even as a little entity, we may be able to create a lot of possibilities. Anything else from our remaining speakers that you want to contribute before we wrap it up?
Just want to say I've been thinking a lot about Rosemarie bringing our attention to the burial in the National Cathedral. And I mean, what a beautiful sacred space for us as a nation and a way to honor her as a national hero figure that's so important to our history. She didn't want that.
Yeah.
That's not how she wanted her funeral to go. And her siblings went against her expressed wishes in organizing a funeral and a burial at the National Cathedral. She wanted a Swedenborgian funeral. And her brother in particular was very public about, we wanted nothing to do with that. And we want a secular national event. And there was a small gathering of Swedenborgians in New York after her death where they sort of honored her. But I regret that she didn't get the funeral that she asked for. And I wonder if there's something that the Swedenborgian community could do to honor her wishes. I don't know what that is, but it's something for us maybe internally as a community, religious community, to think about.
Yeah.
I love that she's buried there, and I love that people can go on pilgrimage and see that. But just to remember, that's not what she wanted. And as long as we're thinking about disability activism and disability rights, what does it mean when someone is not buried the way that they expressly asked for against their wishes? There's still a story there to be told, I think.
I'd like to jump in and thank you, Rebecca, for that. Very, very important. I remember I met Reverend Clayton Priestnell just before he passed away, and I asked him the story about how that transpired and what it was like for him, because he was the minister who was asked to do her resurrection service. And he said, yeah, he said it was sad. He said, but the important thing is not what happened, but what she wanted. And I thought there was such a profound Swedenborgian insight. It's our will that takes us into the next life. It was quite beautiful. And I've also been thinking, all during our discussion here, the thought came into my mind, if we were to ask Helen, what would you like us to do for you? I wonder what Helen would say. And I personally come back to the way Sage began this whole session with us today, where she quoted Helen as saying, "Were I but capable of interpreting to others one half of the stimulating thoughts and noble sentiments that are buried in Swedenborg's writings, I should help them more than I am ever likely to in any other way." So I take this to mean there's lots of ways we can help the world. And, disability studies and actions, to promote the awareness of everybody has a use, very, very important. And people are called to those various activities. But I think Helen would say, get Swedenborg out there. And I was just reading from this here, if you can see it. Can you all see this? This is 94 years old. I just happened to have it. This morning when I was grabbing this book, this fell out. How I would help the world. And I just keep going back to, this is my own purpose in life, to get Swedenborg out to people in a way that he can be understood. I think Helen says here, if I could help them in any other way, I would like to, well, anyway, I can go on about that, but so I would feel remiss if I didn't keep emphasizing this point. Maybe this is my particular piece of the puzzle.
I think we all have a different piece, exactly. And for me, interpreting Swedenborg's writings happens through the living of them as well. So it's not necessarily one or the other. There's a relationship between all of these together. I just wanted to make one more thought about this idea of visiting the National Cathedral, which is really resonating with me, certainly to be in Washington, to be speaking and bringing community together around love and truth feels like it could be very useful in the world right now. And I think of Matthew Shepard, he was buried at the National Cathedral because his family wasn't able to find a safe place for him to be buried, because there was fear that his grave would be disturbed because of all of the hate around his death. And so it may have not have been his choice to be buried at the National Cathedral either, but because of the circumstances of his life and death, that was a safe place for him. And there is something in all of this journey for me around disability and how we make space for each other, and then also queerness, how we express who we really are and how we find each other in that. So yeah, there's something very alive about honoring her in that space and all of the complexity of it that's been named here about what she wanted and what was, and the world that she wanted and the world that we are currently living in. And how do we keep holding fidelity to that worthy purpose of that more beautiful world and do each of our parts to bring it into being? Feels very resonant with this effort. Any other closing thoughts from any of you?
I think that one thing Helen would say is, don't forget the miracle worker.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget Anne Sullivan. I mean, because and I think, isn't Anne Sullivan buried with her?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and I had read somewhere that Polly Thompson was there, and she's another person that's forgotten here. And she was with Helen as longer than Anne Sullivan was. So anyway.
Yes. And that giving and receiving that made so much of this possible, which I hope will be a part of the collaborative's efforts. One of the questions that has come up is kind of how to be involved, how to stay connected to this. It is a bit unwieldy. If we were all in a church building together, we would know who was involved and we would have donuts and coffee and it would be, more straightforward. Because this is virtual and we're all over the place, it's a little bit trickier. We do have a website and a mailing list, and we have ongoing events, ongoing gatherings. I focus on these Zoom gatherings where we really can be together like we are together here, sharing our experience, sharing what brings love into our lives, what's true for us. And I'm excited to expand those offerings for more communities. So maybe a WhatsApp group. That's been another, actually, especially in the world today with social media and all of the pieces, it's been a little tricky to find. I've been thinking about a WhatsApp group. I've also, Group Spot is another thing, but some kind of a place virtually where everyone and really the invitation is if you're someone who loves Helen Keller, if you're someone who believes in this call to be loving and truthful and useful in the world, you're welcome to participate. So yes, we have a Discord is another one. So we're finding our way. There's so many options with all the technology, and there's also obstacles with so much of it. But we'll be in touch after this, and I encourage all of you who have joined. We'll save the chat because I have not been able to follow it and the conversation. We'll save the chat. We'll save the questions. Alex and I will do our best. Alex, I don't know if you want to come on, show your face before we say goodbye. So right now, this endeavor is really just me and Alex Gayhart, my executive assistant. There they are. We are funded for a few more months. We don't quite know how we're going to be moving this forward. So fundraising, if you have connections to granting bodies that might be able to support this work, if you have, really all skills are needed right now. If you're good at editing podcasts, if you know about virtual spaces, if you have connections to universities, really think about what you have on board. Maybe it's really small and you just would be able to, do one thing for 20 minutes a week. And that one thing for 20 minutes a week could really, really help our effort. So we are actively looking for support from every possible direction. We have a bunch of collaborations that have emerged even just this week. One of our readers, Judith Lathine, she writes spiritual autobiographies. And so we want to create a space where we can bring people together to think about writing our autobiographies. We want to bring Helen's story to life, but we also want to bring all of your stories to life. We all have stories. We all have so much to bring. So that's one initiative that's emerging. Another one is that a collaborator for a long time, Louis Randa, who actually commissioned the statue that you mentioned, Rebecca, of Helen and Annie together. He's a peace activist and he's founded the Peace Abbey. So he's really, those 6 areas that Helen cared about: economic justice, peace. Peace is a big one. And so he's someone who is a collaborator of ours to help be in this conversation about how do we be peaceful, and how do we be peaceful activists in the world, which I think is going to be probably needed more and more in the years to come. So those are just a couple things. We also have a congregation in Kenya that has become very inspired by this effort. They are celebrating together in person with dancing and food today while we're here on Zoom. They've made Be Love, Be Honest, Be Useful t-shirts for their community. So if you're a congregation or if you're a part of a congregation that might be interested in having a Helen Keller collaborative part of your ministry, please be in touch. This is something that our efforts can be something we do together, but it also can be a part of other efforts that are already ongoing. So we're just about at our closing time. I'm sorry I haven't been able to follow all of the comments. But there's a lot, and I'm just so grateful to be together. Thank you all for being here and bringing your energy, your insights. April is very appreciative, Ray, of your comments about her poem. She's a huge part of this effort, and she co-leads our Sunday Be Loved, Be Honest, Be Useful gathering. So I encourage you all to check out what's going on, check out our website, and just pop in and see what might come. Any other closing thoughts?
I just did post a closing thought up there that I think has to be included at some point, that Helen does point to Swedenborg, but Swedenborg points to Jesus. And I would love to see things end with Jesus, the incarnation of God on earth, which I think was the heart of Swedenborg's message and everything that Jesus stood for and taught, so.
And the heart of Helen's. And so, at this point in our history, when Christianity is being so misused in so many parts of our planet, I think Helen knew what true Christianity was, and she knew it, and she spoke it, and she lived it. And, that is one of the things I feel excited about. A trip to the National Cathedral, but also a trip to Alabama. What would it be to really proclaim the call of Jesus and the life of Jesus in relationship with others, and how can we communicate across our differences? As has already been articulated, this is a very big challenge. It's a challenge I feel excited to wade into. And I think when we start with love, when we start with just not seeing each other as identities or names or enemies or allies even, but just as fellow humans, if we can really do that and find each other in that way, and then share about our real experience of what it is, instead of just our opinions about how it's supposed to be, I have some hope that kind of way of communicating could birth some new possibilities and new connections and collaborations that we perhaps can't see when we're only staying in our group and our identity. And this is how Helen lived in the world. I put that quote up a lot. She often said she her greatest satisfaction came from working with men and women of all religions who shared in a desire to lessen the suffering of God's children.
That's right. Yeah.
And we can be a part of that through all of our shared efforts. Well, it's 1:30. We made it to the end. Thank you all for your participation, for all the panelists. Please, this is not, I shouldn't have said we made it to the end. We finished the beginning. We will be in touch after this, and I'm so grateful for all the work everyone is already doing in the name of love. And I hope you'll feel called to collaborate and connect in more efforts moving forward. So many blessings to all of you.
Thank you, Sage.
Thank you,
Bye,
Sage.
friends. Be well, be love, be honest, and be useful. All right.
Be happy.
And be happy, yes. Bye-bye.